Welcome to the Trail Chasers podcast. I'm your host, Dean Horwitz, and I'm excited to share this journey with you. Each week, we'll be hitting the trails with some of South Africa's most inspiring trail runners, diving into the topics that matter most and uncovering the secrets of this incredible sport. Lace up your trail shoes and join me on this adventure. New episodes every week. Kieran, welcome to the Trail Chasers podcast. I think for me, I really wanted to have you on. I've been following you and I've seen your online brand. And I think for me, the interesting thing is how you get across the stories that you're trying to tell or the information you're trying to get across, but you do it in a really cool way, in a really viral way. So that was, for me, is quite interesting. And obviously you've been on some cool adventures as well, especially in the sort of trail running space. And it seems like you're someone who really wants to help people get into trail running, and you seem to really love the sport. So welcome. Thank you very much for joining me. And let's dive right in. Who is Kieran?
First of all, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Probably one of the least accomplished runners you'll have on your podcast. So it'll be good for your guests to see how the other half live. I'm a somewhat reformed data scientist, engineer type who's recently decided to pursue the creative. Not because I've recently come across the creative. I've been doing video in some form or another for 20 years or so, but just realized recently that it's something I've kept coming back to over the years, and the career moves and the skills I've tried to learn in the more sort of logical, quantitative side of things have not intrigued me. And where running and biking, which also appears in my content, comes into the picture is I needed a sort of thread of subject matter that sort of inspires me, that I can weave through my content to try and have like a niche to start off with, and after getting a little bit of traction, if at all, then grow from there. So that's where I am.
Sure. And talk to me about trail running. What initially drew you to it? How has it become a significant part in your life?
The introduction to it and the sort of acceleration of it are two quite distinct events. The first, like the introduction to it, was I was just living with a bunch of guys in 2017 or so. There were 6 of us in a house. I was never really a runner, still not, but I guess more so now than I was then. And they were all into running and entered the odd race, and I got a free entry to the Bastille 15K, I think it was. So I went along there with Nike road shoes and a backpack flopping around, not like a hydration pack.
As we all do, yeah.
Great way to start. And then I did nothing for a number of years. And so that was my first taste of it. And where the acceleration or amplification of it came was a couple of years later, just before COVID, actually. And obviously I was trying to impress a girl by saying that I can trail run. And we entered a race together. And I got sold some shoes that were not trail running shoes. They were hiking shoes.
Oh, wow.
By
Okay.
Union Mart sales rep.
Yeah.
So painful race. Shoes brand new the night before the race. And loped through that. But that's where it all began.
And what was that race? What was it? Was it like a certain distance, or was it?
Is it Delvira in Stellenbosch? Does that ring a bell? And I think it was 18 or so.
Sure.
And it was blowing about 30 knots on the day.
Oh, wow.
Which is, I don't know if your listeners prefer the Beaufort scale.
Yeah.
It's probably an 8 on the Beaufort scale or something like that. And we were running up hills and people were getting literally blown back down the hill into each other, and we were getting knocked all over the place. It was terrible. Blisters on the feet. We did a shakeout the night before also to impress said girl, and it was too far for me. I was still very early on. So it was a very tough day out.
And how has it evolved since then?
It's been somewhat of a roller coaster, actually. So later that year, which was 2020 and was in COVID, a friend of mine who lived just below Blockhouse and had access to the trails there quite easily said, I've been doing this loop, come along with me. And so I got a taste of Table Mountain for the first time, really, which seems so strange to say considering how much I love it now. For my life in Cape Town, I'd never really seen it. And so we did a couple of those. I bought a pair of Salomon Sense Ride 3s, and those were fantastic. And it felt like this sort of meteoric rise in my own life, at least. And we kept pursuing longer distances and new trails, and let's go to Constantianek this week, and we'll go to Stellenbosch that week, and Vlakkenberg side, and they kept getting longer and longer. And then, as so often happens, I guess I got a little bit ahead of myself.
Yeah.
And when you're early in the game, you don't know that there's risks with increasing volume too quickly, with biting off more than you can chew. And you should recognize that because it happens in all spheres of life. But I guess you just feel on top of the world. And so I was struck with a little bit of an injury, and And it's been a bit topsy-turvy since then.
And are you still dealing with the injury?
I am, very much so. It really flared up in 2022 for the first time, just over 2 years ago. I was doing it was a 32K that I'd plotted out. Fred a hook, up Plotter Clip, along the top, down Nursery, along the contour, back down past Blockhouse.
Yeah.
Told my two mates it was 26 to convince them to come with. And ironically, now, the one of them came 15th in UTCT 100 miler last year, and the other got a silver in his first comrades.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
They really left me in the dust.
Yeah.
But 26Ks into that, also ironic, because that was the distance it was supposed to be. Just this like big sort of tweak on bending down in the knee on the lateral side of the right knee, and it's never gone away through 2 years of rehab basically, and 3 physios, a bio, 2 surgeons, a radiologist, all thought they knew what it was, and none of the prescribed things have worked. So, but I should say there's a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. For the last 3 weeks, my boss actually, or the CEO that I work with, suggested this guy that he came across on social media called Knees Over Toes guy. I'd never heard of him. Ben Patrick is the name. And he's got this philosophy which is a little bit contrarian, at least to conventional wisdom in weightlifting and so on, which says that you shouldn't ever, when squatting and doing lunges and so on, bend past roughly 90 degrees with your knee. But his idea is that you should use the full range of motion of your knee. And he's got this thing called the ass to ground split squat, where you really try and bend the knee in question, the loaded leg, such that the calf touches the hammy basically.
Wow.
So you're really using the full, and then his big thing is sled pulls. So attaching a waist belt to the front and then attaching that to a sled and walking backwards with the sled, which you can also do on a treadmill, reverse treadmill. And I've been doing that for 3 weeks and it feels incredible. I've managed now 6 or 7 runs, which I haven't been able to do for like over a year.
Wow.
With confidence. So it feels like I'm almost giving my knee nutrients or the stress that it needs to recover. Holding thumbs, but doctors didn't help.
And talk to me, I guess, about going back to the kind of the beginning of trail running. What is your kind of general and personal philosophy around like starting new things and starting? Is it you jump in and learn the lessons, or are you a bit more cautious?
Good question. Because I am a quite cautious and prepared person. Tend to overthink things, like I worry a lot, but I guess that's paired with something in my personality that's I think it's like a very high level of curiosity and inquisitiveness, which stems from, I don't know where it stems from, probably my dad's largely like mechanical nature. I was tearing apart computers from an early age, and I guess you got to like fuck around and find out.
Exactly.
And so that's the approach I've taken to a lot of things. And when I've felt bored in my life, I tend to arrive at the question, perhaps earlier than others, why is it like this? And surely it can be different, sort of thing, which has led me to start things occasionally. And I'm no successful business founder or entrepreneur or anything, but I've tried things perhaps maybe more than the average person. A little drone videography business, and I tried to sell prints online, and I sold fake IDs at school when I was 16. That was my first bit of revenue. And my personal brand now is the most recent iteration of it, and using those lessons. So I like to dive into things, and I try to tell people that you can have all the ideas in the world, but you've got to just start at some stage, to take that first step.
How is that kind of adapted to trail running?
The way it came about was I didn't know that I wanted a personal brand. I guess it's, with hindsight, you look back and it's so obvious that this sort of taken shape like that. But basically what had happened was over the course of 2 runs with a friend of mine, James, I decided I think I need to share this joy that I'm experiencing in these trails with people. Like, how is it that I can feel so good and there aren't more people out here, and and I've got friends who don't necessarily know about this. So I went on the next run with James. We went from Newlands Forest to Constantia Neck, iconic routes around those parts, and just filmed with my phone, got into the car afterwards, downloaded, I don't know, 3 or 4 video editing apps to try them out, recorded a little voiceover in the car, and made a TikTok. I didn't even have Instagram. It was deactivated at the time. And that's where it all started. Posted on TikTok, a couple of 100 views, maybe 1,500, with 0 followers. And that really showed me that, wow, you can get traction by just having some content. And then that was 18 months ago, unfolded nicely since then.
Sure. I think there's something to be said about, like, when your passion comes through it, people resonate with that.
And talk to me a bit about, have you had a particularly profound moment during trail running, or a particular moment where you've learned quite a lesson from it?
My running history and career, if you can call it that, has really been pronounced by injury. I think I didn't treat my body growing up purely probably out of ignorance. You just think you're more bulletproof than you are. And when I was struck with this sort of mysterious injury in the knee, which is a crucial mechanical part in the running process, a few years ago, it was like, I couldn't, first of all, I was training for a race. So the first big thing was like, it's like this slow but very quick realization that, okay, I'm not going to be able to do this thing I paid money for and that I had my sights set on, which is brutal. And that's happened 5 times since, in terms of entering races and not being able to do them. So there's a bit of a lesson then in I was probably trying to bite off more than I could chew. But as I said, like you feel good and you enter things accordingly, right? You set up your future accordingly. So the lessons that have come from injury are vast and numerous, and it's taken me to the purchases of various books about rebounding psychologically from injury. I go deep into the hurt cave with these things, and especially my girlfriend's a very good athlete, and we take a lot of joy out of our running together. And so they're not being able to join me, for example. So getting injured has been profound, and I'd like to think I'm coming back a lot stronger through all the rehab and the lessons I've learned about the body in that process. But it's quite humbling.
And talk to me a bit more about that the mental aspect of it. And like, how did that affect you, and how have you built that resilience?
I think the book that I bought first was called Rebound. I don't know, there was 2 American authors. And the big takeaway there is that getting injured is really an opportunity to come back a better version, a stronger body, and hopefully in such a way that you can avoid that particular thing that took you out. Often it seems that the biggest predictor of injury is having been injured previously, especially with things like tendons. So that can be quite an ugly truth of it. But it's recently this year, I did a 21 earlier this year, and I thought that all was right in the world. And then a couple of days later, the injury came back. And over the months ensuing since, I've felt at times like I can't identify as a runner anymore. It's quite it like affects me in my thinking day to day. And it's this thing you look forward to when you're at your peak, good 4, 5, 6 times a week, maybe. You can't do it. So now I've been in the gym more than anything else, and it's a different experience. It's not the same. You don't have the things passing by you quickly in your eyes and the thrill of the mountain in your face and so on. But it's humbling is the word.
And how do you deal with that kind of notion that trail running is meant to be so good for your mental health, but then you do have this kind of other side of it where if you get injured, it really affects your mental health, or pushing it too hard, it can affect your mental health. How do you deal with that kind of aspect of it?
I think it's a bit of dissonance that I've had to employ in that process. The one is I know the joy and the benefits that come from it. It's a space of reflection, and you keep fit, and it's good for your body, and being in nature is objectively good, and so on. So it's this very distant goal that I've got at some point that I know I'm going to reach again, and that keeps the motivation high. But day to day, when you can't actually do it, you've got to latch on to some other activity to keep you fit and strong in the meantime. Because if your prescription from the healthcare provider is don't do something for a month or drop the volume or something, you've got to fill that gap with something. And that so it's a bit of, I think what it is, acceptance that you have to replace this with something for a while, if not forever. Hopefully not the case.
And talk to me a bit about what you do outside of the trail running, and particularly talk to me about the last year of your life. Traveling around Europe, traveling around South Africa. Talk to me a bit more about that.
Long travel stints have punctuated my adult life, and it's been really good. And it's just happened to happen every 4 years. And last year, I was in the process of trying to do my job from overseas, like being moved, like an intra-company transfer type of thing. And when it became clear that they weren't prepared to do that and pay me a commensurate salary overseas, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to quit. And therefore, if I'm going to be between jobs, I might as well see the world a bit. So I'd prepared my girlfriend for this the day that I met her. I knew that something like this was coming, and I thought I was being like, okay, be careful. I could at a moment's notice want to up and leave sort of thing. And Little did I know at the time that she's actually extremely open-minded and carefree in that respect, and she's just open to anything. So that was really helpful. And in April 2023, we quit our jobs and hopped in a Land Cruiser camper van, a converted Land Cruiser camper van, and did a lap of South Africa over 2 months.
Wow.
And I'd been creating this trail running and mountain biking content for a few months at that point. And I decided that a theme of it that would make the trip quite more interesting than it was going to be anyway, would be to try and find cool trails all over South Africa to park the camper van and camp near.
Yeah.
And that was really cool. It was the dead of winter, so it was extremely cold, and it didn't always work out. And in some cases, you can't actually get close enough to the trails. But a couple of very cool places, Hogsback. We were in the Drakensberg for a bit. We went up to Hoedspruit. Not a lot of running up there, but a beautiful part of the world that neither of us had ever been to, so that was great.
Sure. And then on to Europe.
A week's break, delivered the camper van back, a week's break, and jetted off to Europe for 2.5 months, trying to keep costs down. We went to the Balkans first, which was a little bit of uncharted territory, at least like psychologically for us. We started with Albania, not a place that people flock to from South Africa, at least very hard to get to, a number of flights. And then we went from Albania via Greece for a couple of days to Bulgaria, and we went to four places in Bulgaria, 2 of which were ski resorts.
Oh, wow.
For purposes of looking for downhill mountain biking resorts, which are typically have nice forests and good trails as well for running, which we partially succeeded at. At least we were successful in finding them. We were less successful in finding good trails. Bulgaria is not known for curated single. And then we went down to Turkey and did a bit of beaching and so on down there. And I spent a week in Solbach in the Austrian Alps on my own while my girlfriend went to London. And that was top 1 weeks for me of my life. I thought it was going to be a downhill mountain biking week, but I ended up doing a lot of hiking and trail running as well, because it was just once in a lifetime opportunity. Hopefully not. And then we went to Madeira next.
Wow.
And I don't know much about Madeira. I didn't. But it's a hiking mecca.
Wow.
And there's hundreds of kilometers of trails. And generally where there's good hiking, there's good trail running. And it was just 12 days of this majestic single track along these levadas, which are these ancient Portuguese aqueduct type systems that have carved. It's concrete and it's largely flat for the water to flow gradually from the mountains to the coast. But it means that there's these paths that have been cut into the mountains that goes deep into the mountains. And it's this quite small island with 2,000 meter peaks on it. So it's got these like spectacular sheer landscapes. So that was quite something. So just under 5 months of travel. Good to reset the mind, came back hungry to get my teeth stuck into something new. And it turns out that's largely my personal brand.
That, I guess, goes nicely into kind of the next kind of question is, you've built this quite successful personal brand. How did that start and what does it involve?
First of all, thank you. When you're in the thick of it, in the weeds, like it never feels that successful. It's always, okay, what's the next goal? But certainly looking back, I started with 800 Instagram followers when I reactivated my account, and it's almost 20x that now, which is good numbers year on year and so on. And perhaps it's easier to get big growth numbers like that when you're small. We'll see if I can continue to grow it. We'll see what the growth looks like. And what it required early on was I almost had a recipe or a formula of, hey, let's go for a trail run, which I'd say to a friend or a girlfriend and so on, or a mountain bike ride. I would take my Insta360 action camera, my phone, and I'd just take shots along the route. Harder when mountain biking because you need both arms and both legs to ride. The footage on rides tends to be more like action camera mounted on chest, thrilling POV type stuff, which forces me to ride beyond my ability more than I'm comfortable with for the fans. But running, it's much easier to get spectacular content. You can stop and shoot nice things. Then I'd go home and for the first 60 videos or so, I'd freestyle the script like on the spot into my phone, which was a nightmare because the app that I used, you could always tell whether there was a cut in the audio. So I'd have to get one continuous take, which means I'd take 17 or 18 times to do it. And decided spending an hour trying to get a perfect take, might as well spend an hour writing a script, recording that and curating it and making it more concise and punchy. So that's where I ended up after 50 or 60 videos, which I now do. And where that came from is a strange blend of the first videos I made in my life when I was about 10 years old I had the family handycam up at Tokai Mountain with hardtail mountain bikes going down the single tracks there, and I was like filming us. So action sports, I guess, was like in my filming DNA from
Sure.
then. But then at a job I had more recently at a company called Explore Data Science Academy, I was the video content creator for the data science content in the courses. And through the process of making 150 odd tutorial videos in data science, I converged on this process where I'd write a very concise script, narrate it, and got quite efficient at the audio editing part of that. And so my personal brand, when I decided I must share the joy of trail running with people, what does the video look like? It was just obvious to me that I must merge action sports with this voice-overed, curated, scripted thing with a bit of humor laid over the visuals that I experienced during the run. And
Sure.
I thought that would give a good example of what I experienced while I was out there.
Talk to me a bit about the growth and how have you kept that formula, and how did you figure people were responding to it?
People responded quite well initially, and all you need, I think, as a signal in the human's head, all you need as a signal is like a couple of, not even 100 people expressing interest, but as soon as you can see 1 or 2, maybe 10 people saying, hey, that's something I'd like to see more of. That's all you need, really. And that just happens at larger and larger scales as you grow, and it's a sort of nice validation. So the recipe has changed because I got bored, really, and it wasn't really sustainable, especially because my injury got a lot worse during that time, for me to set out and film 2 to 5 runs or rides a week. So clearly the inputs were unattainable. So I started pivoting to repurposing content a little bit, and then landed up on a recipe more recently of telling stories of my experiences, which I think I know those the best, and I can tell the story reasonably well. Whether people are interested in those long term remains to be seen. And then the growth side is interesting. You've probably experienced the same working in social media and podcasts and so on, but it's almost like unpredictable. I've had content ready that I felt was cringy and this isn't going to work, and what are my friends going to think, sort of thing. And then it explodes and you get tens of thousands of views, which at my scale is a lot. And the opposite is also true, that you think something that's going to pop off, you launch and it falls flat. Interestingly, when I tried to be a little bit more instructive or informative, it was a running video actually, it was called Why Should You Run or something. And I tried to cover 3 reasons about why you should run. That was an outlier in the negative direction.
Interesting.
So I've come from this educational, instructional background, and that is that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to help people, but on social media, on the internet, to succeed, you have to be entertaining. You can be useful, but I think you have to be entertaining first. So that's where the storytelling, dry humor, throwing shade on people sort of thing came about, and I try and lightly weave in educational bits into it.
Very clever. In terms of the feedback loop, the things that you want to do versus the things that people are responding, what is the kind of process and the feedback there?
I've realized through the people I listen to on podcasts and the books I read and so on, that it's not a sustainable strategy to make what the crowd wants, because you will please them for a little while, but it's almost certainly not going to be what you want. And if you look at what succeeds on the internet, like Mr. Beast, for example, is that stuff actually what you want to be making? Like biggest possible stunts to keep people's attention for the longest. So I think that one way to succeed is to be authentic and consistent in your own right. And you might piss some people off, and some people might choose to unfollow you and so on. But if you can find a core group of people in your niche, you've got a little bit of traction, and I think you can grow from there, and you can think about expanding later.
Let's move on to the content creation side of it. Talk to me a bit about the role that plays in it and your passion for that. How's that evolved for you?
I guess I have a strange outsider's take on filmmaking, because I didn't study film. Like I come from this quite non-creative world, engineering and data science and statistics and so on. It's it's not associated with like high levels of creativity and so on. But I've been making videos for a long time, so I've always been flexing that muscle, if you will, or what Carl Newport calls deliberate practice. So making things on the side and slowly improving that skill. And my for some reason, my philosophy is not always been to get like a big, nice DSLR, like these cameras and big mics and so on, and walk around with the best gear.
Yeah.
I guess I took a lesson from Casey Neistat early on when he said that the best camera is the one that you have on you. So it was a lot of shooting with the phone. Always had GoPros, tiny. You can always have them on you. They're wide angle, so they shoot a lot. And then I got into drones 10 years ago, and that is harder to be lightweight and portable with those. But that is how I've tried to select my drones going forward. Can they fold? Are they small?
Yeah.
Lightweight? Can you run with them, hike with them, and so on? So I have this sort of outsider's like contrarian take on filmmaking. And as much as I'd love to put cinematic films together, what I actually produce is quite scrappy, fast-paced, and yet quite curated because it's heavily scripted and I plan every clip. So it's like a blend of the logical with the hasty.
And how does it feel producing the content for social media in kind of the fast-paced world, like putting your effort into that for that kind of that quick feedback?
I'm probably going to break a lot of hearts here, but I really don't like social media. I wish it didn't have to be like this. Social media, I can say a lot of kind words about it because it's got me to where I am in terms of you can just launch content there and it will find a way to show it to people, which is amazing. That's data science happening behind the scenes, the recommendation algorithms. So I have to be a little bit grateful in that respect. But the evidence is also extremely clear about the damage that it's doing to people. Yeah. Attention spans, phone usage. I know in my own relationship that it's extremely distracting for me. And my whole business, if you will, goes through this little device that I'm like focused on for metrics all the time. And they know how to present them in a good way where your notification comes through and you've got X likes and comments and so on. And you just go on that 10, 20 times a day to look. I've realized that. And as much as I think I will continue to use it to drive traffic to other areas. But what I'd like to do is create content and post it in a more sustainable, evergreen, searchable way, like YouTube, for example. There's elements of YouTube that are social media-esque. But for example, you go there to search for how to do something or tips about a place. There's no searching that goes on social media. On TikTok, I think there is, not really in my generation. And then another one is Substack, where you really have a one-to-one mapping with your subscribers, and everything you post, they will see, which isn't the case on Instagram. Instagram just takes what you post and shows it to whoever it thinks is the most suitable viewer, if anyone. So I like that one-to-one relationship. And I think that you can be successful with a smaller number of one-to-one true fans. Yeah. The idea of 1,000 true fans that David Kelly said, actually. You don't need millions of people. You just need 1,000 people paying you $100 a year and you've got a good salary supporting you doing what you want. Yeah. So that's where I'd like to go.
Interesting. And how do you blend that kind of wanting to educate people, but doing it in a fun, viral way, pleasing both sides, pleasing yourself in terms of getting that kind of educational aspect, but then pleasing the audience in the fact that it's cool, it's fun, it's viral, it's enjoyable. So you're learning something, but at the same time, you're actually enjoying it. Is there a secret formula?
There must be, because Mr. Beast gets 100 million views in like 24 hours or something, and he claims to have cracked that code. Yeah. And I think you can. And I almost like, I have a first epoch and a second epoch in my content. That the second one started the 1st of Jan this year when I decided to dig into the data and try and group videos together and say, and tag them with certain things. Like, is it a biking or running or hiking video? Did it have a hook? What was in the thumbnail? Describe the thumbnail sort of thing. And a couple of things became quite clear quite quickly that I then acted on. And I made far more colorful, punchy thumbnails with text on them, big, bold text. I start off with a hook. So I'm guilty of falling in the trap of, I know you have to now use a hook to get people's attention. And fair enough. I guess it's the same with any content, a book, a movie. It can't be boring until halfway through because you just won't have any more viewers. So I acknowledge that you've got to grab people's attention, and I've worked out reasonably good ways, for me at least, of creating those. Asking a question or saying, or like stating a problem that people might be able to relate to, and then launching into the idea sort of thing. So grab them in 3 or 5 seconds and then start the story. It's quite a simple change from just starting the story. You retain a lot more of the people who initially saw it.
And for those that are new to trail running, what are the kind of essential tips, techniques that you recommend to getting started, to progressing their distances, things like that?
Interesting. I don't think this is dissimilar from honing a new skill or picking a new career or starting a business or starting something on the side, because I really think that people should identify that there are not very many obstacles in the way, actually. I'll go back to my first trail was a race, and I did it in road shoes and like a gym backpack, and it was amazing. And you see a lot of very cool kit, and you need Salomons or Ultras with 0 drop or lugs this long, and you got to have 2 500ml soft flasks, and you must have a flat peak 5-panel cap, and you must have a hydration pack. But the truth is that a trail run, all it really needs is a trail, dirt of some sort, something that's not a road run, which I guess just means undulating terrain and somewhat off the beaten track. That's all you need. I really believe that. And I think there's it almost shouldn't have its own title, because then people think of it as the separate thing from road running that they don't really know how to get into. But it's very simple. You just probably, for most people within a taxi or a bus ride or car or a walk even of their homes is a free or close to free thing, park, like something like Newlands Forest or Silvermine. There's a free section in Silvermine, for example, that you can give it a whirl in, and I think that's all you need.
That's definitely an important one, because you don't even know if you're going to enjoy it
exactly.
to start off with.
Don't invest in, don't get the website built for 9 months for your business and then decide you don't actually want to do it. Sort of thing, you know?
And talk to me about overcoming mental barriers during the run, when you hit those low points, but also during your training, and I guess you can talk about it in your broader life as well.
I love this area of running and of work, and particularly when I was creating the educational videos at my last job, I came up with this idea that I called the pain cave, and I've since worked out that I wasn't the one who came up with it.
You were unique in that.
Where you can allocate yourself an hour or two, and that you're going to be digging deep for creative output. And you can actually summon it on tap if you need. You don't have to wait for it to strike. And I think with running, it's very similar. That on most runs, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, unless you're like on the promenade or something. And the other thing is that on the day, anything can happen. Uruguay can beat Fiji, for example. And you don't know what your body's going to do on the day.
Yeah.
And so what you think might be an easy run might be challenging. Anyway, the shorter runs are easier to deal with because they're over quickly. But when you're on a long trail, a friend of mine invited me on what was called it's not 3 Peaks, it's like the spine of Cape Town or something, where you do Lion's Head, Kloof Corner Ridge, and Devil's Peak. We went up the chains along the front to Maclear's and then down ledges. And we planned for this thing to take 4 hours, and we had a liter of water each. And 6 hours in, when we had long since run out of water, and it was December last year, it was furiously hot. We were both late for lunches, as you always are when you're trail running. We decided to call it quits, and we didn't end up on Devil's Peak. Anyway, I was deep in the pain cave then. Ledges, I don't know if you've ever been around ledges. I don't recommend it.
Yeah.
Even for the experience, it's quite scary. He's a rock climber, so he was a bit more prepared, but I didn't like what I was doing.
Yeah.
We had no water.
Sure.
We actually drank from a pool of stagnant water just below Maclear's. It was brown in color with tadpoles in it, and we were that desperate. We ended it and we high-fived, and Matt said that was valuable time in the pain cave, and it's type 2 fun, because you don't like it while you're doing it, but you realize the value of it later. And there's something about going deep into that cave and working out, or just seeing that the body can actually do this. I'm capable of overcoming this. So I look back on it favorably. I don't know if I'd do it again, but he's going to invite me to do it again.
It's also so interesting about the kind of the mental pain cave, in terms of not on the running side where you're in the physical pain cave. In terms of the creative pain cave, I've never actually thought about it like in that type of context. I guess it's harder to do, as you say, to summon it when you're in that kind of state, rather than when you're on a run, no water, middle of December. That comes pretty quickly.
The creative one is something I grapple with a lot, because it's required for all my videos, and I don't earn very much money from my personal brand yet, so I've got other ways of earning an income. But I do the same thing. I actually make videos for clients, and they require scripts and deep creative output as well. And I thought that it was like, okay, I must wait for the time to strike. But reading Deep Work at the moment by Carl Newport, it's become quite clear that you can just be quite regular about your creative sessions. And there's a little bit of what I think Huberman said, he calls the initial agitation, that you've just got to get through. 10, 15, maybe it's 30 minutes or whatever. It's the same with sport, where it feels cuck at the beginning. And then you get through and and then words are just coming out in the case of writing, for example, or performance is coming out, or speaking to the camera. I also struggle with it a hell of a lot. But if you spend if you get through that barrier, that initial agitation where it's like really hard, suddenly you're like in the zone. People have called it flow. It happens all over the place.
Yeah.
If you can identify it, I think you just have to embrace the pain cave, want the challenge, seek hard things, seek difficult things, and there's a reward on the other side almost every time.
Sure, that's incredible. And tell me, what are some of your favorite trails and locations, particularly in South Africa and in Cape Town, that you believe people have to experience?
It's almost like loaded because your favorite ones will largely be based on where you happen to have been. I'll say Madeira is incredible, but like most people, it's just not going to fit into their schedule or able to do it. In Cape Town, Newlands is a very special place. I've made 2 videos now, something to the effect of, is this the best place to run in South Africa? I haven't run everywhere in South Africa, so I don't know. Heard good things about Machuba's Kloof, for example.
Yeah.
And I've been to Hogsback where the Amatola Trail is. I've done the trail, the hike, and we went there to do some running last year, and those are spectacular. So those are great. Table Mountain's iconic. It's enjoyable, but it's extremely technical. There's no shade. You're going to do a lot of elevation, but it's massive, and you can really, like, within a couple of clicks of a big city, you can get lost up there, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
So those 3 are some of the best I've done in the country. Going to Austria in the Alps last year, for example, where there was a lot of elevation, and going to various parts of Portugal, and we ran in the Albanian Alps, and we ran at the resorts in Bulgaria and Drakensberg and so on. Table Mountain prepares you extremely well for whatever you're going to come across. Big, loose rocks, and every step in some stretches is a 50-50 whether you're going to roll your ankle or not.
Yeah.
You run that gauntlet like thousands of times in a run. And then there's stretches along the contour that are absolutely beautiful. Yeah. Towards Oppelskop, for example. Some of those stretches are amazing. So it's probably not the best, but I think it'll sort you out.
What are some of the goals or projects that you're excited about? Trail running, outdoors, adventures, even work that you've got coming up or that you're planning?
I've dreamed ambitiously through my life, which I think is a good attribute. But in running, and I think maybe being the cause of my injury is aiming too high too quickly. So I would love to be running ultras, road and trail, probably preferably trail. But I realize that it's going to be a long road back to that level of fitness and ability of the body. And I should be clear as well that I also want to be running when I'm 93.
Yeah.
So I don't want to break everything now for the benefit of short-term gain. Like I want to be able to do this for as long as possible. But certainly I want to be running ultras. I want to get to the place where I have the endurance to be out there for a long time. Partly because a big dream of mine is to make endurance sports films.
Wow.
So 2 of my icons there, or idols there, are Bo Miles of Australia on YouTube, and Jeff Peltier, the Canadian guy as well, who makes brilliant, like takes along similar camera gear to me, but produces exquisite sort of stories from the inside of events. Like he came second in the Moab 240, and no one's ever seen inside that, seen aid stations and so on. Like that was very cool. So I'd love to be able to do that, but you've got to be able to, so that's a big goal. And then in terms of the personal brand, I think that the internet is a wonderful place that, to quote an idea I like from a guy called Daniel Priestley, everything is downstream of lead generation. And I do think that it's probably the hardest part for most people. It's the hardest part of building a business is generating demand. Everyone knows how to generate supply. You've got a skill that you think is your passion or something that you've honed at a job, management consulting, digital marketing, so on, whatever it happens to be. And that's supply. You've got all the supply in the world, but there's no business if you can't generate demand.
Yeah.
So I've come to this conclusion that with content marketing, which is largely what I'm doing, you can create an audience. And with an audience, you've got built-in lead generation for any idea that you want to do. You've got distribution up front, which I think is one of the hardest parts of business building, at least of building a sustainable long-term business. So I'd like to get the personal brand to a decent size and start using that to draw, to generate leads for business ideas that I can then spin up and derive value from.
Amazing. And finally, what is the one thing that you hope the listeners of this podcast take away from it?
I've found a lot of joy and challenge, but reward in my life from questioning the status quo, just double checking at every point. Is this really the right way to do it? Is this how it has to be? Do I have to commute every day for the next 60 years? Those sorts of things. And the logical next step in all of those situations for me has been to, let's just try the alternative or an alternative. So it's that idea of just start, because nothing will happen if you don't just start. What is the easiest first step that you can do? With trail running, can you find a bit of gravel to take your road shoes to? That would be the equivalent of the first step. Just start.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This was incredible. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And thank you for joining me.
Dean, thank you so much. Great questions and good fun.
Thank you.
Feeling fired up after this incredible episode? Dive deeper into the world of trail running by exploring our other episodes, available wherever you get your podcasts. We're eagerly awaiting your feedback as well, so connect with us on Instagram @TrailChasersPod. Don't hold back. Comment, message, and share your thoughts. Until next week, keep chasing those trails.